demo of making King Arthur Flour's Hearth bread. And you really just need a few simple ingredients, and they include 1 teaspoon of yeast, 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 1 cup of lukewarm water, and then the recipe calls for 2.25 to 3 cups of flour. You want to start with the lower amount. So in my bowl, I have 2.25 cups, but I have the remaining amount on the side in case I need it. To make this dough, we use the straight dough method, meaning that we dump everything into a bowl at once and mix it. I like to first put in my dry ingredients into the flour, and then I can go ahead and mix them a little bit to ensure that they're fully incorporated before I add in the water. You can do this with a fork, a spoon. I'm just using my bowl scraper because that's what I have here on hand. Okay, and now I'm going to pour in my 1 cup of lukewarm water. You want to make sure it's not too hot because you'll kill the yeast, but if it's too cold, it won't activate it. And now again, using a spoon or your bowl scraper, try and bring the dough together. Once it has mostly come together, you can dump it onto your countertop to continue hand kneading it. I'm going to put a little bit of flour down just in case, so I don't want it to stick. And some people tend to go a little bit overboard with the flour. It's much better to start with a lower amount and just add as needed. Get the remaining off of my bowl scraper here. All right, and now I'm going to continue to knead the dough by hand. If you go ahead and touch it, it may still be really sticky. So you can use your bowl scraper on the counter to kind of fold the dough over itself until it's a little less sticky. And you can continue adding flour as needed. One good idea is you can keep a flour pile up here and then just touch your hands into it when you need to add extra flour when it starts to stick. And what we're looking for when we're kneading is we want to end up with a nice smooth dough. If you're doing this in a food processor or in a mixer, it will go a lot quicker. But if you're doing it by hand, just have patience. Typically, it's going to be about 5 minutes. And what I'm doing is I am pushing the dough in the middle down away from me and then folding it back over on itself, rolling it up a little so that the seam is at the top, and then turning it 90 degrees and continuing to do that. If you find that you end up with a lot of dough on your fingertips, the best thing to do is just rub your hands off to the side and don't try to incorporate that back into your bread dough because those are already sort of saturated with flour. They're not going to blend in nicely. And then just keep working with clean hands. And I'm continuing to add a little bit of flour as I go here. I've been kneading for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I want to show you what the dough looks like. So if you can see that, you can still see it's kind of shaggy, some lumps in it. So we have to keep going until it becomes much smoother. As a reminder, when we're kneading, we're actually causing those gluten structures to start lining up and making that tight weave, which is what we want with yeast bread. So with quick bread, we wanted to not develop too much gluten, but with yeast bread, it's essential to develop that gluten to have a nice strong dough. I've now been kneading my dough for 5 minutes, and I'm going to set it aside to rest for a little bit so the gluten strands can start to relax. Then I'm going to come back and knead it for another 2 to 3 minutes. While my dough is resting, it's a great time to scrape out any remaining flour bits in my bowl and then spray some pan spray or put a little bit of grease in it, because our bread dough is going to go back in here while it continues to bulk ferment and rise for the first time. I've sprayed my bowl, and now it's time to get back to kneading our dough for another 2 to 3 minutes. Even from that short rest, you can see that when you try to knead your dough again, it's a little bit more relaxed. It's a little looser just from that short rest. I have finished kneading my dough. I did it for about 7 to 8 minutes total. And you can see now that the texture of the dough is so much smoother on the top. So I'm going to take my greased bowl, put my dough ball in it, and then flip it over. So now the top has some grease on it as well. And I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap, place it in a draft-free place. If you're at home and your turned off oven is a great place to store it, for about 45 minutes, all the way up to 2 hours. It really depends. What we're looking for is for this to double in bulk. And this is called bulk fermentation. So it's when we allow the entire mass of dough to rise and normally double in bulk before we continue with our next steps. It's now been an hour, and I went to go and check on my dough. And you can see it has nicely doubled in size. So now we're going to shape our loaf of bread. In order to shape our loaves, the best thing to do is just place it out onto your countertop. It does still have some of that oil on it, so it shouldn't stick. And just kind of press it out a little. Okay, and this basically, we're gently deflating the dough, which sometimes is called punching. It's a lot less violent than it sounds. And now we're going to go ahead and shape it. So for a loaf bread, a good way to do it is to kind of press it out a little bit and then just fold it like a letter. By doing that, it gives us some extra layers when we're making our loaf, and they tend to rise a little higher. So I've just folded it, and now I'm just going to place it onto my baking sheet. And now is the process of proofing, which is, again, another rise, allowing our yeast to make those carbon dioxide bubbles. And after about another 45 minutes, I'm going to put it into the oven to bake. While I'm letting it proof, again, I want to cover it with plastic wrap. You want to lightly grease the plastic wrap so that way it doesn't stick to the bread, and we keep the bread protected so it doesn't dry out on the outside. My bread has been proofing really nicely. It's gotten quite puffy. So now all I have to do is score it and then place it into the oven. And the reason that we score it, meaning make some slashes on it with a knife, is that we want to control the expansion of our bread. As it starts to expand, if we don't have places where the air can come out, then a lot of times it'll blow out the side and it won't look so nice. So you can do this with a couple different tools. You can use a serrated knife. This is a specialty tool called a bread lame, and it's kind of razor sharp, and you draw it across quickly. So either one will work. And typically you can do it any way you like for looks. So I'll just drag it across at an angle. And it's best if you go kind of quickly and firmly, and then you have some nice lines there. Now that I've slashed it, before it goes in the oven, I'm going to spray it with some lukewarm water. And what this does is it keeps the crust from setting immediately in the hot oven, so it allows for bigger expansion. The bread is going to be in the oven between 25 and 35 minutes. When you knock on the bottom, the bread should sound hollow, or you can stick a thermometer in and see if the bread is at least 190 degrees.